This message is brought to you by Alliance Bible Church located in Mequon, Wisconsin. Our vision is to captivate generations with the satisfying gospel of Jesus Christ. For more information about Alliance Bible Church or other resources, please check out our website, myabc.church.
Get your Bibles open, if you would, to Daniel 7. Daniel 7. The end of the world has been a popular subject among modern people. You know how I know that? Hollywood movies. Hollywood movies are a clear witness to this fact. Over recent years, we have seen the release of films in which the future of life on our planet is threatened by, here's the list: aliens, asteroids, floods, frost, killer viruses, lethal machines, mutant creatures, and nuclear holocaust. Those are just Hollywood movies. Where does this interest come from? Why is there so much interest in this subject that even Hollywood's wanting to make movies about this? Well, I think we all have an existential angst about not just our personal future, but about the future of the universe. And I think God put that interest in us. This interest in end-of-the-world scenarios should make apocalyptic sections of the Bible objects of careful study. If people want to know how the world will end, what better place to turn than the word of the sovereign God who controls and writes all history? Yet, for many Christians, the apocalyptic sections of the Bible, such as the section of Daniel we're headed into, are often kept at a distance, which is why, folks, I have pastoral colleagues who will preach Daniel 1 to 6 and then go to something else. Many Christians get nervous about entering these apocalyptic sections of Scripture for fear they're not going to be able to understand what they find there. My hope is to help alleviate this uncertainty that you might have concerning apocalyptic sections of the Bible. I'm getting ahead of myself just a little bit here. What is apocalyptic? What is apocalyptic literature? Well, apocalyptic literature, which is what we find in Daniel 7 to 12, you've got good chunks of Ezekiel in there, a small portion in Isaiah, of course, the book of Revelation, which we will begin in the fall, is a sort of prophecy, I would say. Prophecy that seeks to, what does it seek to do? It seeks to enlighten and encourage people who have been despised and cast off by the world. And it seeks to enlighten and encourage how? With a vision of God who will come to impose his kingdom on the wreckage and rebellion of human history. And it communicates this message using wild, scary, imaginative, bizarre, and head-scratching imagery. That's what it does. It's here, folks, to encourage and enlighten. Encourage and enlighten. This is what it's here for. So please keep that in mind. And by the way, at the beginning of this series, I did warn you, right? You need to come caffeinated to this. You need to come caffeinated, right? The situation surrounding Daniel is what? Remember COVID? Nobody wants to think about it, but remember COVID? If grocery stores ran out of something, it was meat and potatoes. It was not Skittles. People were making this observation all over the place, right? The candy aisle in grocery stores during COVID was very fine. It was set. It was golden. Why? Because in a crisis, nobody wants something light and fluffy and of little nutritional value, right? They want something substantive, something that's going to sustain them, something that's going to give them what they need to bear up under the weight of a crisis. The circumstances surrounding the book of Daniel are what? They're crisis. You've got a foreign nation that's just invaded and conquered your city. That's a crisis. So what does God give them? He does not give them Skittles. He gives them meat and potatoes. We love that until we have to work hard at trying to understand it. Right? So I warned you We're getting in this section of Daniel now where the stories and all the fun stuff we've encountered in the first 6 chapters kind of goes away. We make a change. There's a pivot. There's a really big shift that happens. I hope you're ready. Now, apocalyptic literature. Let me get back to this. That's not in my notes. None of that was in my notes. Okay. How do we read apocalyptic literature? Actually, you instinctively make these sorts of decisions as you engage with literature, even though you're not aware of it. You instinctively look at a group of words, a page, a paragraph, a book, whatever, and you instinctively know how to read it based on what kind of genre it is. You don't go through a checklist. This is just instinct. It's embedded in us. So, for example, if we know that a sentence that begins like this, here's the sentence. The sentence is, the stars will fall from heaven, the sun will cease to shine, and the moon will drip blood. A sentence that begins like that, I know, will not end with, and the rest of the country will be partly cloudy with scattered showers. Right? We know that. The reason we know that those sentence fragments don't go together is that we immediately perceive a mismatch between their genres. One is apocalyptic, the other is a weather forecast. Okay. Knowing what literary genre you're reading is critical to understanding it rightly. With regard to apocalyptic, it's largely a dead genre. It's not one that you, in the rhythms of your everyday life, encounter all that often. And so we're out of practice, much more than the ancient people. We're out of practice. And so how do we get into practice of understanding apocalyptic literature? Well, practice. We need multiple exposures to it. And so we're going to get a dose of that in the rest of our journey through the book of Daniel. Daniel 7, here's the big idea of Daniel 7. Daniel 7 gives us a panoramic view of all of human history. Okay? Daniel 7 gives us a panoramic view of all of human history, and it shows us some of the spiritual realities behind the human evil we've encountered so far in the book. It's like God's reminder to say, look, I've recorded all these events that have happened on the human stage. You've seen all this take place, but I want to show you what's happening behind that. There are spiritual realities taking place behind Daniel 1-6 that you need to see. Because think about all the human evil we've encountered. Nebuchadnezzar invades and conquers Jerusalem. He threatens to exterminate Daniel and his friends. He threatens to execute anybody who doesn't bow to his statue. Belshazzar engages in sacrilege and debauchery. The king of Persia's cabinet dupes him into issuing a decree that would result in the death of numerous Jewish people. Lots of human evil we've encountered in Daniel 1-6. Well, 7-12 is kind of pulling back the curtain and say, okay, here's the spiritual reality behind these events. And here's a perspective on them you need to have if you're going to bear up under the weight of this sort of evil. Okay? We're going to look at 3 things in Daniel 7. The beastly nature of history, the ironclad kingship of heaven, the final conflict of suffering. First, the beastly nature of history. Daniel 7, let me read the first 8 verses. We need to get some practice reading this, understanding this. Daniel 7, starting in verse 1, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. So here's just a reminder. What have we done now? We have jumped back in time. And we're actually at the beginning of Belshazzar's reign. Remember, chapter 5 recorded the last day of Belshazzar's reign and the last day of the Babylonian Empire. Okay, we have now gone back. We've gone back in time to the first year of Belshazzar's reign. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot what was left. It was different from all the former beasts. It had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them. And 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. What do we have? We've got 4 winds churning up the sea. 4 winds is often a way of saying this is a global thing that's taking place. It's happening in every part of the world. Churning up the sea. We know we're operating in the realm of metaphor imagery. The Bible and elsewhere in the ancient Near East, the sea was a symbol of chaos and rebellion against God. And it's for that reason the sea was the natural home of monsters like Leviathan. Leviathan, multi-headed monster of ancient storytelling. These monsters were terrifying not because they were large and dangerous like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. Right? They were terrifying because they are evil, opposed to God, agents of chaos. So it's not like Spielberg's creation. This is more like a rated R version of the vampires and zombies in the most chilling and disturbing horror movie. And in Daniel's vision, the sea is churning up these creatures one after another, 4 in all. First beast, lion with wings that are clipped off, the mental faculties of a man. The second beast is a bear that had 3 ribs in his mouth. What's the point of that? It's showing you that the bear is not fasting. It's not fasting. It devours much flesh. Third beast was a leopard, 4 wings, 4 heads, brazen power given to it. Now, frightening as those beasts are, the most hideous creature is yet to come. In Daniel's words, the 4th beast was terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces. It stamped on what was left. It had 10 horns. Then an 11th grew, displacing 3 pre-existing horns. And this mysterious 11th horn had the eyes of a man and a mouth that spoke. Notice, if you would, that this 4th beast isn't compared to any animal like the previous 3. You could actually draw the first 3 beasts. I don't know how you draw the 4th beast. I know a lot of renditions have been proposed out there. I scoured the internet just taking a look. Well, how would you know? There's some aspects to it, but there's a lot you don't know about this thing. What's the point of that? Well, this beast isn't anything like you've ever seen before. In other words, there isn't a category that currently exists that can help you understand the 4th beast. There isn't one. Now, we find a little later that these 4 beasts represent 4 earthly kingdoms. Many theologians will identify the lion with Babylon, the bear with Medo-Persia, the leopard with Greece, and the 4th beast with Rome. And that would make sense if we're operating from Daniel's perspective. However, I think we should all hesitate to link these beasts with these nations in such a hard and fast fashion. One of the mistakes interpreters of apocalyptic literature make is getting too specific with identity linkage. To link these beasts with one and only one empire is an error. Why do I say that? Well, the vision seems to bend over backwards to emphasize the 4th beast can't be categorized. All the beasts are different from one another, but the 4th is in a class all by itself, vastly different from the preceding 3. It's different in its viciousness, its voraciousness, its domination. The 4th beast is not like anything you've ever seen before. So was Rome that much superior to Alexander the Great, such that we could say nobody's ever seen this before? I don't know about that. And if saying the 4th beast represents Rome goes too far, then why would we presume the previous 3 should be attached to Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece? Now, maybe the greatest problem with this approach was saying that those 4 beasts represent those 4 nations is that chapter 7 goes on to describe the climax of the vision as the complete destruction of human evil at the hands of one like the Son of Man. Well, I don't know about you, but 2,500 years later, I'm still looking forward to that. That hasn't happened yet. Greece is no more. Rome is no more. So though the vision may begin with Babylon, the imagery intends to prohibit definite historical identifications. All right, so you say, well, what's this about then? Here's what this is about. The fourfold pattern simply informs us that evil kingdoms will succeed one another until the end of time. It's very simple. Evil kingdoms will succeed one another until the end of time. The message of Daniel 7 is that life in this present age will always be this way until the end of this present age. It's always going to be like this. I mean, think about it. Nebuchadnezzar turns into Darius, who became Alexander the Great, and then Antiochus 4 Epiphanes, which we will look at in a few weeks. These fierce rulers are in turn followed by a Nero and a Domitian, and years later, we see manifestations of these beasts in the person of Hitler and Stalin and Kim Il-jung. The frightening beasts were present on the killing fields of Cambodia and Rwanda, and they're still tormenting the saints in Syria and China and other parts of the modern world. Daniel 7 is a panoramic view of human history. What's it telling us? Well, it's as if the vision is exhorting us to incorporate the doctrine of total depravity into our politics. Daniel's vision is telling us history is beastly. It's scary. And God, in his mercy, wants us to hold to a clear realism about life in this world. A few years ago, Dave Harvey published a book on marriage entitled, When Sinners Say I Do. It's a book that both Pastor Dwayne and I use in premarital counseling. It is refreshing to see that clear recognition right in the title. Marriage may prove wonderful. It may prove wonderful, but don't forget what kind of people are in it. Daniel 7, 1-8 is saying, don't be naive about human history. Don't be so gullible as to think that some new regime or some new ideology or some new party will instigate some form of cosmic therapy. History is beastly. Second, the ironclad kingship of heaven. Let's pick it up in verse 9. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Then I continued to watch. Because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshiped him. His dominion was an everlasting dominion that will not pass away. His kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Now, at the end of verse 8, the previous section, aren't we sort of bracing ourselves? We've got this very descriptive picture given to us of the fourth beast. Aren't we kind of bracing ourselves? What sort of terror is this thing going to unleash on the world? And instead, we swiftly cut to a throne and judgment scene. It's as if the vision knows that what we've seen in verses 1-8 may get us overly anxious. And so it directs our attention to something we need to see before we get too caught up in the beastly nature of history. In other words, the vision is actually doing some good biblical counseling. This transition from verse 8 to verse 9 is not only purposefully abrupt, but the whole structure of 9 to 14 seems designed to diminish the place of the little horn and the fourth beast. There are two characters described in 9 to 14. Two characters, the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man. Now, I don't want us to get the wrong impression of the title Ancient of Days. Today, we understand what advanced in days means. You're old. But that's modern culture, not an ancient Israelite worldview. That this title for God means that he's grand, he's not frail. It imports the idea of dignity, not senility. The Ancient of Days is venerable, respected, judicious, and wise. That's the Ancient of Days. And I love how the text puts it. It says, the Ancient of Days took his seat. It would be an understatement to say the chairman of the board is now running the show. Because it's not a board table he sits at with everybody around it having a say, but a throne in which absolute monarchical authority to judge is his. And then we move from the Ancient of Days to one like a son of man in verse 13. Now notice just quickly here, we've moved up the chain of being. How are evil human kingdoms portrayed? As horrifying hybrid animals. But here, the divine realm is imaged as human beings. It's making the point that this Son of Man is a higher level of being than the beasts. And what was the Son of Man doing? He's coming with the clouds of heaven. This is really cool. In Mark's gospel, into the New Testament, Mark's gospel, when the high priest illegally placed Jesus under oath and demanded he declare if he was the Messiah, what did Jesus say? Jesus said, I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. What's Jesus just done? He has declared for everybody listening to him talk that he is the Son of Man Daniel is referring to. The authority and power of the Ancient of Days and Son of Man is absolute. They're the primary characters in this middle section. And you notice what happened to the beasts during the ornate descriptions of these divine figures? After the description of the Ancient of Days, before the description of the Son of Man, we get this. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. This is the horn of the fourth beast. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority and were allowed to live for a period of time. So if you blink, you're going to miss it. The fourth beast is disposed of with ease, and the other three are relegated to the minor leagues. This is recorded in between the description of the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man. Literally, the beasts get crushed in a divine sandwich. So that's what's happening. But for what purpose? We've got content. What is the intent? What is the author trying to get done by telling us this? These verses are designed to encourage the beleaguered people of God. They're there for your encouragement. The fourth beast and his horn are no more introduced in verse 8 when we meet a swift shift in verses 9 to 14. There's more to be said about the fourth beast, and we're going to get to that. But the text insists that we forget about that for a second and focus on the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man who will dispose of the little horn and the fourth beast in short order. I like how Dale Ralph Davis summarizes this. He says, seeing this secret behind history may not keep God's people from pain, but should keep them from panic. We may still be fearful, but should not be frantic. During World War II, the Germans were quite confident in the unbreakability of their famous Enigma code. I think a lot of movies have captured that. There are lots been written about that. They were very confident in this Enigma code, but British mathematicians and scientists cracked it with their own ultra system. But in order for this to all work, they had to keep that a secret, right? Because if the Germans found out that the English had cracked the Enigma machine, they would just change to something else. So the breaking of the Enigma code gave them an incredible advantage. Gave the British an incredible advantage. So, for example, in March of 1941, the Ultra machine decoded plans of the German Luftwaffe and the Italian Navy to assault British convoys in the Mediterranean. British ships set out from Alexandria, Egypt to meet the threat. To keep the Germans from thinking the Brits had cracked an Enigma transmission, the Royal Navy commander sent out a Sunderland flying boat on a reconnaissance trip. It was within sight of the Italian fleet, so that the Italians surmised the Brits had accidentally discovered their location. The British then essentially blew the Italian fleet to bits and sent the remnants packing back to Naples. Now, just because the British had the Ultra machine didn't mean they could forget the war, but it had to be a real morale booster for England's leadership that they could know what was going to happen ahead of time. Verses 9 to 14 is our Ultra machine. It tells you what's going to happen ahead of time. The Ancient of Days and the Son of Man will dispose of evil earthly kingdoms with ease, and they and all those who worship them will reign forever. That may not keep us from pain, but it should keep us from panic. We may still be fearful at times, but never frantic. Third, the final conflict of suffering. Let's pick it up in verse 15. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth, but the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that looked more imposing than the others and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. So even though Daniel has an ultra machine that tells him what's going to happen ahead of time, he still inquires further into the fourth beast. Look at verse 19. Daniel says, then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast. Now I want to do just a brief detour here. Throughout my 20 years in pastoral ministry, I have heard Christians time and again say something like, I don't know how it's all going to work out in the end, but I know we win. And there's a nobility to that. There's a faith to that. There's a trust to that I can admire. But it's sometimes used as if to say further reflection on the matter is not warranted. I just want you to note that Daniel has been given the we win in the end statement already. And after he's given that, what does he do? Does he say, well, we win in the end, so why bother? No, he says, that's great, we win in the end. I want to know about the fourth beast. So, Christian, there is something to wise living that says, okay, I get we win in the end, but we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to go a little further. We're going to keep poking at this. There is something about wisdom that is just like that. End of detour. Okay. Daniel's troubled by the dream. He walks up to a bystander, maybe an angel, asks him what's going on. What does the angel do? The angel gives a summary of the whole thing. So we can't say we don't know what's going on. Here's what the interpreter says. The four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth, but the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. That's essentially what the first 14 verses were telling you. Well, he wants to know more about the fourth beast, which is more terrifying than the others. So the interpreter elaborates. He says it's going to exercise worldwide domination. Its savagery will be universal, but victory follows. Verse 26, but the court will sit. His power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. That's fantastic. So what's the fourth beast? Now, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think we should be taking these four beasts and trying to specifically identify them with one and only one nation. However, the state of affairs that follows the fourth beast seems to be something you and I are still looking forward to, is it not? Now, before I propose an answer to that question, notice for a moment what characterizes the fourth beast. This fourth beast kingdom will speak against the Most High God. It will persecute God's people, and it will self-deify, try to change set times and laws, self-deify. Now, on the one hand, those of you who are history buffs, haven't we seen this before on the world stage? I think we've seen this kind of thing before. So 1 John 2:18 is worth remembering. John says, dear children, this is the last hour, and as you have heard, the Antichrist is coming. Even now, many Antichrists have come. Many Antichrists have come. See Pastor Dwayne's sermon on that text for more. So before we get too caught up in identifying the fourth beast, we need to remember in broad brushstrokes what this chapter is about. Evil kingdoms will succeed one another until the end of time. Life in this present age will always be this way. You need to remember that. But I do think the little horn will climax in what Paul calls the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians. The Antichrist, as we have typically understood it in modern vernacular. But Jesus will handle him. 2 Thessalonians 2:8, and then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. There's going to be a lot more to say about that in the future, but don't miss this, brothers and sisters. Before this final conflict of suffering, even now, across the world, various little horn types mash and mangle Jesus' people. Some of you have seen the news headlines of Christians in Syria recently. Some of you have seen that. So when we see that, there's a sadness for our brothers and sisters who are being killed in horrific ways. There's a sadness to that, but there's never a shock. There's never a shock. Because God has clearly told us it's going to be this way. So how do people like that endure? I think it's one of the purposes of the book. God's saying, I'm going to give them the book of Daniel because they're going to have to deal with some of this. So how do they deal with this? How do they do that? How do they bear up under the weight of this kind of evil? Most of you probably know the name Corrie ten Boom. She, along with her sister Betsy and their father Casper, were instrumental, they're Christians, instrumental in hiding and protecting numerous Jewish people as they fled the Nazis during World War II. In February of 1944, they were discovered. What they had been doing was outed. They were caught, and they were sent to a prison in the Netherlands. 10 days later, Casper died. Corey and Betsy were then eventually transferred to Ravensbrück concentration camp. In December of that year, Corey's sister, Betsy, died. 12 days later, Corey was released. Quite literally, Corey faced one of the beasts. She faced one of these beasts. Up close and personal. It took the lives of her father and sister. But despite this, she walked closely with the Lord to her dying day. How can God's people endure in the face of this? There's the question. That's the question. How can God's people face this and bear underneath the weight of it? How can they do this? Obviously, she had a perspective that could stand up to the beast. Throughout her book, The Hiding Place, which I highly recommend you read, you get glimpses of her perspective as she lived through this. And one of those is seen in her very short but punchy statement. She said this, "There is no panic in heaven. God has no problems, only plans." God has no problems, only plans. I don't know how you maintain hope in the face of beasts if you have a very small view of God. What kind of view of God do you think Corey had? How big is it? Seeing what she saw, and she's able to say that? Corey's view of God was enormous, and it sustained her faith through indescribable tragedy. And so we cling to the promise of verses 26 and 27. But the court will sit, and the beast's power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom. Friend, I encourage you to get that eternal perspective. Let's pray. Sovereign God, though the realism of this chapter is not pleasant to our ears, we trust that in your infinite wisdom, you have shown us the beastly nature of history because it's necessary for us to understand it. You desire us to be utterly realistic about life in a world that has been indescribably corrupted by sin. Thank you, Lord, for not leaving us in the dark about that. But we also know that this chapter has marvelous hope for your people. Against the ominous backdrop of human evil stands the looming victory of the Son of Man. And so in our own anxious moments of uncertainty, remind us again and again how this story is going to play out. You have shown us what will happen ahead of time. And so I pray the knowledge of that truth will protect us from panic and instill in us hope in the face of whatever catastrophes lie in our future. Your kingdom and no other will be an everlasting kingdom. We praise you for that. In your name, amen.